The answer to yes, it's coming in through our northern border, but we are doing everything we can to secure that. We are working with Homeland Security very closely, and they're doing an incredible job on that as well, Chairman.
Ms. Meng.
Madam Attorney General, I wanted to ask about a topic that's of great importance to many Americans and especially my constituents, which is about hate crimes.
This was an exchange between Congresswoman Grace Meng and Attorney General Pam Bondi, and on the surface, it sounded polite, professional, cooperative even. But underneath, that calm tone was a very real, very uncomfortable question. Why is the federal government pulling money away from programs meant to prevent hate crimes, especially when hate crimes are still rising?
I'm really troubled that your budget proposes to end the grant programs that may help prevent some of these hate crimes. As you may know, I was the author of one of these programs, the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice program, which was created in fiscal year 2022. This program supported local groups working to increase hate crimes reporting, give community members resources in languages other than English, and to improve relationships between local law enforcement and the community. It was a direct response to the rise in hate crimes targeting Asian Americans during the COVID-19 pandemic. You may recall in March 2021, 6 women of Asian descent were tragically murdered in Atlanta, Georgia. My Hate Crimes Act passed through Congress in May of that year with bipartisan support, including from several of my colleagues on the other side of the dais. For years, I've been hearing from constituents about how scared they felt and have been hearing from members of these communities as well as experts who've told me that one of the best ways to combat hate in this country is to fund prevention programs. So not just prosecution, but also prevention. I have a letter here that hate crime survivors and family members wrote to you in May, expressing their strongest concerns about the termination of these grants. Signed by people like family members of Emmett Till, James Byrd Jr., Matthew Shepard, and survivors of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the hearing record this letter from these survivors and family members to Attorney General Bondi regarding the termination of hate crimes-related grant programs.
Without objection. Oh, yes, without objection.
Thank you, Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, I absolutely share your support for law enforcement and for the prosecution of hate crimes in a just way, but we must combat all forms of hate on all fronts, bringing together law enforcement and community leaders and members of the public. And these grant programs have helped many communities do exactly this. So I just wanted to ask and hear from you why there is a proposal to eliminate the 3 largest sources of DOJ funding for hate crime prevention programs.
Yeah, and Ranking Member, can you list those 3 for me again? And I'm sorry, I have not received your letter yet, but I would welcome working with you on any issue regarding hate crimes in the Asian American community, in any community. I welcome working with you on that.
Okay, yeah, I would love to. And this letter was sent May 15th, and we'll make sure that you and your team have received it. So the programs, one of them, for example, is named the Community-Based Approaches to Advancing Justice. 3 programs have been cut, and one of these programs literally help support our law enforcement departments locally, like our NYPD, to train and respond to hate crimes.
Okay, let me see. So we have 5,800 grants, Chairman, that come, Ranking Member, excuse me, that come through my office. 365 have been cut so far. That's approximately 6%. What I will tell you is we have turned back on 13 of those so far because people have reached out to me. If you want to reach out and talk to me directly, I will give you my cell phone. I would love to sit down with you and see if we can work that out. I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with those 3 directly. But again, we will, if you have on either side of the aisle any grants that you believe should be back on, I would love to meet with you and work with you on that. We're doing that on a case-by-case basis, and law enforcement is my top priority, especially hate crimes, violence against women, everything I've done my entire career as a prosecutor. I think we have a former prosecutor in the room too. And I look forward to working with you on this and seeing what we can do to help you.
Great. We'd love to work together, and we will flag all the programs that have been impacted, including those that directly support our local law enforcement like NYPD. And just to be more specific, the 3 programs mentioned are community-based approaches, Jabara Hire, No Hate, and Shepherd Bird, No Hate Shepherd Bird. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Attorney General.
Grace Meng wasn't speaking in hypotheticals. She wasn't playing politics. She was talking about her constituents, about communities that have already been targeted, traumatized, and in some cases murdered. She reminded everyone that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Asian American communities across the country saw a surge in violent hate crimes. We all remember the headlines, the fear, the uncertainty, the sense that suddenly just existing in public carried risk. And she made something very clear. Prosecution alone is not enough. You can punish a crime after it happens, but that doesn't bring back lives. It doesn't undo trauma. It doesn't stop the next attack. That's why programs like community-based approaches to advancing justice existed in the first place. These grants helped local organizations increase hate crime reporting, provide resources in languages other than English, build trust between law enforcement and communities that historically fear or avoid police. That's not soft on crime. That's smart prevention. Then Meng did something that completely changed the weight of the moment. She referenced a letter written by hate crime survivors and family members, not activists, not politicians, people who have already buried loved ones. Families connected to names that should never be forgotten. Emmett Till, James Bayard Jr., Matthew Shepard, survivors of the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting. These are not abstract policy debates. These are scars on American history. And those families were pleading with the Department of Justice not to eliminate these grants, because they know what happens when warning signs are ignored. That's the part that makes this exchange impossible to shrug off. Pam Bondi's response was measured. She emphasized her background as a prosecutor. She affirmed her support for law enforcement. She said hate crimes are a priority. And then came the issue. She wasn't familiar with the specific programs. She didn't know which grants were cut. She framed the situation as a numbers game. 365 grants out of 5,800. 6%. But here's the thing. For the communities that rely on those grants, it's not 6%. It's 100% of their support. She offered to reinstate grants on a case-by-case basis. She even offered her cell phone number. And while cooperation sounds nice, that approach quietly shifts the burden away from the federal government and onto lawmakers and communities who now have to beg for funding that already existed. Prevention programs don't make headlines when they work. They don't trend on social media. They don't come with dramatic courtroom moments. What they do is stop violence before it happens. They educate. They de-escalate. They build trust where fear would otherwise grow. When those programs are cut, the message, intentional or not, is that prevention is negotiable, that it's secondary, that we'll deal with the consequences later. But later is when people get hurt. This exchange wasn't loud, it wasn't chaotic, and that's exactly why it's important. Because it shows how easily life-saving programs can be reduced to line items on a spreadsheet. How decades of pain, trauma, and lived experience can be met with, "I'm not familiar with that program." Grace Meng wasn't asking for special treatment. She wasn't asking for unlimited spending. She was asking for recognition that hate crimes don't begin in courtrooms. They begin in communities where fear goes unchecked, where language barriers isolate victims, where trust between law enforcement and residents breaks down. And once that trust is gone, it's incredibly hard to rebuild. Yes, prosecution matters. Yes, law enforcement matters. But a justice system that only shows up after blood has been spilled is not a complete system. It's a reactive one. The families who signed that letter already know the cost of waiting. They're not speaking from theory, they're speaking from loss. If we truly believe that every community deserves safety, regardless of race, religion, or background, then prevention can't be treated as expendable. It has to be treated as essential infrastructure. Because the absence of prevention doesn't show up in budget hearings. It shows up in vigils, in funerals, in names we repeat long after it's too late. And if we keep cutting the very programs designed to stop hate before it turns violent, then we're not just failing policy, we're failing people. If this matters to you, don't let it disappear quietly. Drop a comment and tell me what you think. Should hate crime prevention be optional or essential? Hit like if you believe prevention deserves real funding. Subscribe for more deep dive breakdowns like this one. And most importantly, stay engaged, because the moments that sound calm in Congress often have the loudest consequences outside of it.